Does that look okay?
Yeah.
Oh, and I got that little thing. Okay. That way my notes are right in front of me. Notes. Oh yeah, and I can do this.
So it seems kind of cold up there, Karen. Like a really big sweater on.
So yes, it is cold. It's actually not that cold, but Derek, it was funny when Derek, I saw you in a t-shirt the other day and I was like, oh my gosh. Like I forget that because when you feel cold, I'm like, oh.
It's actually cool here. It's probably in the low 40s right now. I think. I don't think we've hit 50 yet, maybe.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. It's just low 30s here, so not horrible.
Oh, 51. It's 51 right now. So I think it's going to be in the low 60s today, which is nice.
Mm-hmm.
I think on the platform they can't get in until right at the time frame. That's probably what it is. Awesome.
Sounds great. Talk about yes. Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you so much, Derek. Excited to be here today and with Derek too, who's going to be helping with this session as we go through and really hope to have, a conversation around this. Derek and I have met virtually. We've never been in the same space that I know of recently. So this will be a fun time, and really looking forward to it. Oh, and I just saw Shannon went to UMass Boston. All right, great. Maybe we're there at the same time. I wonder. Great. I think Go Beacons, right? That's their lighthouses is their mascot. Interesting fact for UMass Boston. All right, so we're going to get started, and I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen on this platform. So just as Derek said, we're going to go through, quickly review, talk about ability or disability and how we frame this within an equity strategy. Talk about, we have an engagement strategy for inclusion and walk through that. And I'm going to, with Derek, kind of go through that piece and provide some examples. But then at the end, we invite people who are on the call, who are in the session, to really, as you think about this engagement strategy, think of some programming or some ideas that you have, and we'll have the opportunity to walk through that to kind of design and implement a program that provides an inclusive setting for people with diverse abilities or disabilities. And then at the end, have a conversation on how to stay engaged, how we can do this locally in Florida, and then nationally, the national conversation on providing welcoming and inclusive spaces for people with disabilities. So quickly, we always just like to start here and frame our conversation, right? Our mission for all, right? In our mission statement, we have those two very important words, for all, and really working to strengthen communities for everyone. And within at the national level, our diversity and inclusion statement, we do elevate ability, right? That is a key piece in this statement. And I will continue to walk through this. Derek, interrupt me at any point if you want to add something. I just lost Derek on the screen. Now I see him. There we go. So our dimensions of diversity, hopefully many of you have seen this wheel. If it's your first time, we have a number of courses available. But really, when we say for all, we're looking at all the different dimensions of diversity. And we have diverse ability and mental health in that piece. Really saying, what are the abilities and what are the, everyone has ability, everyone has mental health. How do we ensure we're being supportive, welcoming, and inclusive for those individuals, in addition to all the other dimensions of diversity? So this session, as I said, we're going to focus on our commitment to inclusion across all dimensions of diversity, including ability and mental health, as it's core to our cause in strengthening communities for all. Derek, did you want to add anything on this piece as we were talking about ability and how it fits into the dimensions of diversity wheel?
I think that for those of you who were on the call yesterday, I know that Karen kind of gave an overview of making sure that we are providing spaces where each person feels welcome, but also we're about to go into a slide where we talk about equity, and so I don't want to advance into that too much, but really are the programs that we're providing meeting the needs of those in our community. And we're going to go over a bit more of understanding those needs and where we can find local statistics for Florida, but really understanding that there are needs in our community. The last aggregate study that was done from the public schools in Florida showed over 300,000 students with different needs. So there are so many needs across all of our communities, and we want to make sure that we're serving each person in a way that really pulls them in and engages them and gives them access to the same programs that really do lift them up and strengthen communities.
Perfect. Thanks, Derek. And I think what we're really trying to highlight is, as we talk about equity, and we'll talk through a couple slides on that, when we're looking at these communities of different abilities, within different abilities, or looking at communities of in terms of mental health as well, how do we ensure we're meeting everyone's needs, but applying the same processes, practices, procedures that we do for engaging any community, right? How do we ensure that we're treating everyone, right, as an individual and everyone equally? So we have, this is our graphic here when we talk about equality isn't the same as equity. And from this graphic, I'll quickly go through this and then we'll move to our next one that we had some conversation around yesterday. But if you look on the left side, we have 3 individuals who are all given the same box, right? The same amount of supports, whatever is needed to reach the apple. And then on the right side, and you can see that individuals can't reach, not everyone can reach the apples. And then on the right side, from my screen, we see that individuals are giving different boxes based upon the supports they need to reach their goals and outcomes. And our next slide, the slide I like to use in having these conversations, comes from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. And this looks at the same idea of equality, giving everyone the same thing. We have a number of individuals who have bikes, right, who have been given bicycles. And on the bottom, we see that, same thing, that based upon different needs, individuals are given different bicycles based upon how they support their needs. I like this image a lot as we talk about this because it really highlights based upon ability. But another question I often ask, and I brought this up yesterday, is, what happens to your view of equity if that recumbent bike that we see for the individual who uses a wheelchair costs a significant amount of money more than every other bike, right? If it costs, $10,000 for that bike versus the other bikes, does that change your view on equity? Does that change how you view equity and think of that? Derek, do you want to add anything, or what do you think of this? Do you like this visual for as we talk about equity and ability? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that the first time I saw this graphic, I did not realize that every human on the top row actually had the same exact size bike, and so all I noticed was the difference between the recumbent bike and then the other bikes. But each one is actually at a different level too for the people who are upright riders, and so I think that kind of, after seeing it a few times, that was one thing that stood out. We have, when we're talking about inclusion, it's not just about focusing on the one person with the diverse ability or a disability. It's really trying to create equity and access for all in our programs. And yes, making sure that we're including people who otherwise wouldn't have been included, but really building programs that work for each person.
Right, absolutely. And I think you bring up a really good point, Derek, that, sometimes the first thing we see is the disability, or the first thing we see is a visible disability, right? And we're going to talk about that a little bit as when we're looking at national statistics, and Derek has done a lot of great research around local statistics for, within Florida. But really, what do we think of when we say the word disability or diverse ability? And you can hear me saying, you can hear me going back and forth. So we'll talk about that between the language. But overall, just some quick national statistics that we like to start with, in addition, is about 22% of the US population has a disability. And when we talk about demographics and data, the terms we use typically is we use the word disability because that's how it's measured. It's a well-known term. Within the Y, we've been using the word quite a bit, diverse ability. And that's based upon different needs, different understandings. As we talk about, within the Y, we use a lot of asset-based language. And we understand ability on a spectrum and understand there's a diversity of abilities. So different language may be used. You may even notice in your communities, some families, especially parents, may use the term special needs. You may have differently abled. So really reflecting what the community says. But when I talk, you may hear me go back and forth quite a bit between disability, diverse ability, depending on the setting and who we're speaking with. So if there's ever questions, or if you want to throw in the chat box different terms you use or hear, we can definitely walk through those and do that. Great, and I'll move on to our next slide. This is again nationally, and we'll talk about some Florida statistics a little bit further on, but about 1 in 6 youth in the United States has a disability. And we measure this by the number of students that are accessing special education services or have an IEP, individual education plan, or a 504 plan, which are some terms you may have heard. This is just to get an idea of really how large this community is. Another piece too we like to mention is about 1 in 4 families in the United States has a member with a disability, right? So when we think about this, while we're ensuring that we're being inclusive for those who identify as having a disability or diverse ability, we also want to ensure that their family members, their loved ones, their broader community too, that this is important for the entire community. This is important for the entire family. When we're inclusive and intentional, right, in supporting individuals, it has a ripple effect, and people notice that. People feel welcome. If we think about families who maybe have one child with a disability and other kids who don't identify as having a disability. But what is that gonna, is the family gonna feel welcomed when we're ensured we're inclusive of the entire family and in doing that? So next, we just kind of quickly wanted to look back to as we begin to frame this conversation on how to make your programming, how to make your facilities more inclusive, really thinking about some of our key drivers of impact at the Y. Why are, what in our mission are we doing as we strengthen communities? And also what are individuals and families and our, people who come to the Y, whether that's as members, as participants, as volunteers, as our staff, as our broader community. What are some of the things they're looking for, right? And we talk about achievement, relationships, belonging. And I think during this time, especially when we've been socially isolated and unable at times to come into our facilities, we've really seen that, right, the power of the Y and how it can bring communities together during this time. So in understanding that, right, when we understand and look, same thing when we look at communities with disabilities, while there's some, while there are specific needs that may need to be supported, overall, people are coming together to build relationships, to feel a sense of belonging. So how are we creating that inclusive space, right? So, and as we walk through this, we're gonna look at our programming and understand our inclusive spaces, how we can make them more inclusive. And sometimes we may have separate programs, which we're gonna talk about, which meet the needs and still provide some inclusive opportunities. But how do we also ensure that that's driving what we're doing and really the foundation of the pieces that we're trying to build here? Derek, did you want to add on this piece at all?
I think that, we talk about these a lot when we're talking about general like youth programs, right? So when we talk about our outcomes in camp, these are the same outcomes, whether it's for someone from a diverse background or with a disability, as they are for all youth. And so when we're talking about these key drivers of impact, nothing has changed, but that word belonging stands out a bit more, seeing it in this context. And making sure that we're creating that context where they're building relationships with each other, they're respecting each other's backgrounds, they're participating in collaborative ways. And I know that on this call, we have some people from across Florida who, I can tell in the chat, I just kind of wanted to address, you're not going to be able to see yourself on video right now. There will be opportunities for us to share, and you'll use the hand raising feature. And so at that point, we'll be able to share about how you've created and fostered that sense of belonging and build relationships and give youth with disabilities or diverse abilities the opportunity to achieve things in the program, really are setting it up so that they can participate fully in activities and are able to reach those milestones. So I know that there's people on the call who are eager to share about what we have going on across Florida. We're eager to hear from you. And I saw some of those in the chat. There will be an opportunity for that, but right now, until we do the hand raising feature, you won't be seeing yourself on camera. So I just wanted to kind of also address that so that people knew that they weren't having technical issues yet.
Great, thanks so much, Derek. Yeah, and thank you, everyone. I'm really excited to open this conversation up, and we'll continue through just a couple more slides as we talk about this, really providing the foundation. And here, this is, a key slide we use a lot because I've used the word inclusion a couple times, and so we have. And what do we mean by inclusion? And I think sometimes this slide can really help support that, support this idea. And what we have on our screen, right, we have, I'll start from the left, we have the full understanding, what is inclusion? And we see, we're looking at purple dots in this setting, right? The purple dots are really integrated and mixed in with the entire group. We have some other terms, right? We have the term integration, right? Looking at integration, how that can be, while you may be, that may be one group, while it is, within another group, it is not really interacting or really engaged. You have exclusion, where people are forced out to the side, where they don't feel, belonging or involved. And then segregation, which is a completely separate space, totally separate than doing that. So when we're talking about inclusion, how can we get to close as possible to be inclusive within our settings and within our spaces? Wondering, in the chat box, has anyone ever seen this, seen a picture like this before or utilized this? Yeah, and Shannon asked, is kidsincludedtogether.org? Yes, it is. That's they're a great partner, and I believe in Florida too, a number of Ys have engaged with them. Kids Included Together is a training partner that I know a number of YMCAs use that really provide, same thing for camps and for YMCAs and for many different settings, inclusive programming for kids with disabilities.
Karen, I had a question for you.
Yeah.
So does running programs that's tailored, specifically to a target population with their needs, that might not necessarily look like inclusion on the far left, that might fall into another category, are those segues to help people feel included into the Y movement in a larger way? Is there another step that we take after that to kind of get towards inclusion?
Yeah, that's a great question, Derek. And I think, it's kind of setting us up for our next conversation as we walk through kind of walk through this framework. But I think the key question is, and I'll tell a story of how I've learned a lot, right? Because I'm a big proponent of inclusion, of ensuring that everybody's engaged in relationships, are doing that. And when I started at the Hockomock Y in Massachusetts, we had a couple programs that were completely separate. Right, we had programs that were just for kids with disabilities or diverse abilities. And what I did is I said, all right, we're going to be fully inclusive. I'm going to make sure everyone's inclusive. So we took away all of our separate programming and we made everything full inclusion. And in doing that and doing it quickly and not really reaching out and engaging with parents or listening to needs and supports of individuals who are engaging in our programs, what we ended up doing was unintentionally being exclusive. Right? By saying we're going to only do it this way, be inclusive, right? One way, one model, one piece, without listening and engaging and supporting who we are serving. We ended up doing some exclusive things. At the other end too, though, and we can start to walk through this framework. What we realized, though, is that if a child was coming to I'll just use youth since we're in a youth space. If a child was coming to the Y, right, and we went back to our areas of impact and understanding why, they were coming to build relationships, feel a sense of belonging, in addition, build skills, but that wasn't the driver. So I didn't need to make only a separate program or separate space just for kids with disabilities, just because they may learn a little bit differently. So this foundation helps us understand and walk through. And I wish it was an easy model for everything. You know what I mean? You did the same thing for every place, but that's just not the case. And I think, what we began to do is when we began looking at, okay, how do we create spaces for youth that they can build relationships? That really changed how we looked at our programming. And sometimes our programming, especially when we get in, we can talk about this too, the teen space. Right, we didn't have a lot of teens at the Y I was at, a lot of teens coming into the program, but we still had a lot of teens with disabilities who said, we want to come to the Y. So we said, okay, let's start a program that, and we'll partner, with a couple different organizations. And it started off with just teens with disabilities. But then we provided opportunities for inclusion. We were engaged at the Y. They became members and more engaged. So we kind of walk through this, and it's kind of definitely a pathway and a step to walk through and understand how we get there. So I think that's a really great question, and a question we get a lot, right? Is which one do I do inclusive? Do I do, separate programming? Is it okay to have separate programming? And my answer always comes back to, well, what are the needs of your community? Are you listening? Who are your partners? And I think this is a great segue to jump into our inclusive framework and pathway to walk through. So it's always a yes and. Instead of a no, but I think we will always say yes and in this space. So we'll jump right in, engagement strategy for inclusion. And I'll start, and Derek and I think we're doing a good job, Derek, on this session. As you can see, we're getting used to presenting together. So I'll provide the overall, basic, but Derek, if you want to provide some specific, just a couple specific examples, how you relate this more locally to Florida or what you're doing, and then once we get through this, we'll just spend a couple minutes, and then we can ask them if they want to walk through a program or initiative they have. But as we've done here today, really the first step is laying the foundation for diversity, inclusion, and global in your YMCA. So one of the first steps is understand the definition of inclusion and the importance of inclusive programming. Identify if your YMCA is a DIG YMCA, and how does this connect? Sometimes we don't see that connection to our DIG strategies, to equity. So how do you ensure that is? Connect with your leadership at your YMCA, right? How does your leadership view this? What are their priorities? And make the case for inclusion. And we want to ensure that we're educating and informing and building support within the YMCA, right, about engaging this community. So kind of building your capacity. Derek, do you want any thoughts on this first one as we get started? Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think that's perfect. So once we kind of have built that and have that understanding within our YMCA, right, how do we begin to understand our community, right? What disability groups make up your community? What disability populations tend to come to your programs or your facilities, and what tend to not to? I think I have not in both of these, but who's engaging and who's not? And begin to look into why, right? What are some of the barriers that are keeping some communities from coming in and not? And reach out to local groups of people with disabilities. Ensure you're engaging people with disabilities themselves and their families and their support groups, and understand why the Y can be important to this community. What are the goals of the Y, and how do they align with the community? How do we work together to build those? And I'll just jump in, right? Derek, I included some specific Florida resources. What are some ways we can begin to understand our community? And here's what's happening in Florida, Derek. If you kind of wanted to walk through some of these, and we'll ensure these slides and resources will be available for everyone afterwards as well.
Yeah, and so the school districts have the 504 compliance officers, which are working with youth 504 plans. So they are going to have statistical data that's really relevant to the communities you're looking to serve. So if you are trying to figure out where the need is most, so that you can start working to advance inclusion and equity in your specific community, those are great resources for you to start with. The Association of Early Learning Coalitions also provide resources on training. They do have some aggregate statistical data, especially on preschool age children. So for the youth that are about to enter school age, they have more information. But this My 211 Florida is actually a resource network. You can type in your county, you can type in the topic that you're looking for. So if you type in Pinellas and then you were to type in even disability, it will show you the disability network of parents, which is a group in that area. So that's a great way to find for your local community. And some of them have more groups than others that are more specific. There's a group in Hernando County for people who are hearing impaired and with people with hearing impairments. And so there are lots of different resources out there. And so once you start identifying those needs, you can see which community partners are helping meet those needs, or you can collaborate with and work with to understand how the Y programs can better meet the needs. The Florida NAMI office has people who are willing to hop on and do, at this point, virtual webinars, but they have also sent people out to do programs with middle schoolers on mental health. And they have resources for teens and families, family resources for parents who have youth who are struggling with mental illness, and parents are, working to help support them. And NAMI provides that support, but also training for staff. They have e-learnings, and they'll do sessions. They help connect with mental health first aid. And then our United Way partner agencies. So lots of times when you're writing grants, they love to see how you're collaborating with other agencies. And so the local United Way community is able to really help identify partner agencies. ARC Tampa Bay is one that we've collaborated with for trainings, and we've gone out and visited them, and they are a partner agency with our United Way. And so that's a great connection as well. You can some of your United Ways, maybe post-COVID or even now, they're having virtual check-ins where they highlight different agencies and what they're doing in your community. So staying engaged with other local nonprofits helps you kind of keep a pulse on how we can continue to advance our community and where we can support other organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. And Shannon also added in the chat, another great resource is the Family Network on Disabilities, located throughout Florida at fndusa.org. And Shannon, you beat me to it, but I was just going to ask if anybody else had any other great resources they wanted to throw into the chat or mention. I think that's another great. And are, here we begin listing. I know there's more, but there are ways, there's definitely resources out there to begin doing this. And as we move forward, right, so what you've done is you've built, within the YMCA, right, you've gotten your Y excited to do this, to understand this. Shannon also added the Florida Autism Center. Thanks, Shannon. So we've gotten our Ys excited, ready to engage. They see how this connects to their mission, right, to the mission, to advancing equity, to strengthening communities. You've done some research around your community, right? Who's in your community, who's accessing the Y. So the next thing we really want to do, right, is begin, as we say, to select your target population. And this can look in many different ways, but really, you know, who, as we identify gaps, as we see who's in our community, as we see who needs the community, you know, who needs to be coming to the Y. And so this may just be overall. You may say, hey, you know, we don't see a lot of youth with disabilities. We don't see a lot of teens with disabilities, or it could be much more specific. Maybe it's understanding, you know, you've reached out to the Florida Autism Center and they said, you know, we're really working to get more kids with autism swim lessons, because we know the drowning rates for children with autism are higher than other youth groups. So how do we begin to work together to do this? So kind of beginning to focus in on where you want to start, right? Starting small, beginning to kind of get this idea of where you want to begin and focus in. Derek, did you want to, kind of add to this? Yeah, I think that's great. Yep. Let's do it. Oh, I see her.
And then Jenna, you can just go ahead and unmute down at the bottom. And if you want to be on video, you're more than welcome to as well. And just go ahead and do the video, show video.
She's having a little difficulty getting on. I know this is always hoping technology is on our side. Thanks, Jenna, for trying to connect.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not a perfect process. Okay, yeah, she'll have to go ahead and relaunch. So I don't know, Derek, if you want to move along and then come back.
Perfect. So we'll go to the next one. But Jenna, just interrupt us when you hop on. No problem at all. So once you've identified, right, a group or target population, right, how do you begin to identify external support? Who are your potential partners that you can collaborate with? Who in your community can provide support and build trust in the Y about this initiative? What collaborations can build trust? And who in your community can provide access to trainings and to resources and to competencies and complement and strengthen our programs and services? Overall, I would say, we are a partner in this. Our goal is not, right, to be, everything to everyone, right? The Y, right? We have our mission, we have our goals, but how do we do this in partnership with our community so that we are a place that we can do this, but also have our strong partners that can help and really mobilize resources to further this along. Derek, did you want to add anything on this one? Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I wonder, I think Jenna's still trying to get on, but someone's bringing up Camp Coast. So I wonder if we want to, if either Stephanie or Vicki, it looks like, if someone wants to talk about Camp Coast and how that program works. What do you think, Derek? Yes.
Okay.
Hey, Stephanie.
I am totally not prepared to be on video, so no picture. Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay.
I was just going to say it's a program. When I started working at Clearwater, I was blown away at the program, and I know I will say I tried to get on yesterday with my phone in these little breakout sessions, and you can't do it on your phone. So okay. I don't know if Vicki's on or not, so I hope she doesn't kill me for kind of stealing her thunder. But it is an amazing program. It's a small program. We take the program takes about 15 children that are on the autism spectrum. They are probably higher functioning. We don't do diapering, but so they're higher functioning, and pairs them up with what we call a buddy, which is typically a middle school or a high school student who is a counselor in training, so to speak, and they is organized by a school. I don't even know what the credentials are, but a certified teacher that teaches children teaches in the school system year round. An ESE teacher. Yes, sorry. Thank you, Beth. An ESE teacher. And it's just a phenomenal program. I mean, I don't really know what else much to say about it, except that kids come back year after year. And if we had the funding, we would be spreading it to all of our branches. But right now, really, funding is the issue. Mm-hmm. They go on field trips. So they go on 2 field trips. I mean, they have been, right, pre-COVID, 2 field trips a week. One was we have a partnership with a Rotary Club in Seminole, I think. They organize a Horses for the Handicapped program, it's called. And so they go horseback riding once a week, and then they go on another type of field trip. There's a program at the Clearwater Sailing Center that works with children that are autistic. And so we did that program as well with them. We partnered with them typically for one of the field trips a week as well. So lots of different opportunities, and we partnered with a school maybe in Seminole. I don't know the name of it. Vicki would know it. And they refer a lot of the participants to the program. But word of mouth also has a lot of the kids coming.
And then you've also
absolutely
had
go ahead.
Some other partners, like a movie theater that was able to run the movie with the lights on to give them an experience that a lot of other youth are, traditionally able to enjoy, and you guys partnered with them as well to provide that experience to youth on the spectrum too. Yeah,
and like little things, right? So as a branch exec, this like drove me insane, but because we multi-purpose every room for every possible time we can. But Vicki was adamant with me when when summer camp would start, that the room gets set up and nobody goes in the room and changes the room in any way, shape, or form when the kids are not in there for camp. Like, we can't use it on the weekends for meetings and stuff like that, because the sensory overload of moving stuff around was too much and caused a lot of anguish. So we really had to, it made me rethink how to use rooms, work with children in different ways. We changed out lights, got different lighting. ensured that the walls, when we redid the room, we ensured the walls were soundproof almost. I mean, we did some things that we were lucky enough to get a grant to be able to afford to do, but they were some pretty exciting things.
That's really cool. Yeah, and we're hearing a number of things. And Derek, you can definitely interrupt me to comment. But it sounds amazing. We're an amazing program, and really kind of starting with serving kids with autism. I'm a huge fan of camp. That's what I was doing at UMass Boston. Shannon was looking how do we make camp more accessible? Right, camp is. We have so many great programs, so many great things we do. But camp is such a foundational piece of youth development. What a great opportunity. And how do we ensure that everyone can access it? So by Camp Coast, right, is doing that, is providing opportunities for kids on the autism spectrum who may not be successful in a fully inclusive setting, right? Because we know camp, right? Camp can be, when you're outdoors, it can be messy, lots of, as we're saying, sensory overload, lots of changes, lots of movement, right? You've got to be able to move through that. And for some kids, that's really difficult. So Camp Coast has set up a way to add some structure so kids can be successful. But, I think, Stephanie talked about the inclusion piece, right? You have buddies, because that's what camp is about, is making friends, right? Making friends, building those relationships. So how do we still ensure those pieces are included in? And then moving through, and it sounds like, through Stephanie's, right, you had partners, and then you identified more partners, and then you learned too, right? How do we make a space that can be just for this, for this group of kids? What are the other resources? Once we begin serving some communities, right, like this, it may open up doors to other resources, other grants to continue to do that. So great example. Thank you so much. I know I wish everyone could be on and we could be talking through this, but thanks. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for joining on. Derek, anything else on this, on Camp Coast? We'll keep going. Sounds good. So our next step is making a list of resources. I always drive people to Link. Link during this time, actually during COVID, is we've begun using it much more, really understanding it as a learning tool. But how do we connect on Link, and how do we we can do that through Link and then also YPN. But how do we begin to identify resources that you have and resources you need to serve the community? What's the staff time and training? What are the staff materials, supplies and equipment? Are there curriculum materials, a facility space? Just begin thinking through some of these things you need to do, kind of taking a holistic view on how you're really going to serve this community. Derek?
No, we're good.
All right. And then once kind of making that list and looking through things, we say prepare to serve. Are we ready? We have an understanding, we have support from leadership, there's a need in the community. Our YMCA has the capacity and to fulfill the needs of our target population. And sometimes the answer can be, no, we're not ready, right? And we have to go back through 1 through 5 to build your case for support or to understand more. And that's okay to continually go through this process. I can tell a quick story. When I was at the Hockomock YMCA, we began, and it was just through 1 or 2 families, really began to engage the deaf and hard of hearing community that was local, within our service area. And we had an open house night that we brought in. We had some, sign language interpreters that came in, and it was an open house targeted for the deaf and hard of hearing community. So you could go through, talk to program directors, see the why, everything it had to offer. And it was a great evening, and we had a lot of fun. And then we said, all right, let's make a fully, inclusive, we'll have a camp that also has, we'll do summer camp, right? You can tell I love summer camp. That includes kids who are deaf or hard of hearing, and we'll get sign language interpreters, and we'll do that. And we, to be honest, we didn't do a lot of the working with the community, really understanding the needs and what they were looking for. We kind of jumped to, hey, this would be really cool if we had some sign language interpreters that we hired at camp and could be inclusive. And when we got to the point of, we did some, tried to get some staff on board, made some changes. But then once it came to sign up for camps, we didn't get any families that signed up for our camp, that provided additional support. And what we found out is the families we were working with, that's not what they were looking for over the summer. They weren't looking for a summer camp outdoors that was, inclusive, that was, inclusive, that had kids with and who could hear and who could not hear, that were engaging in that way. So we had to kind of go back and say, okay, if this isn't it, what else can the Y do and serve? So it was a really big learning process, and to go through that and really, for us, our learning process was, how do we really engage and listen from the beginning? Sometimes we get excited and want to do everything. But, just a great piece to say, it's okay. Sometimes you are ready, sometimes you're not ready, and things will evolve and they may change, and that's okay as well. Did you want to add, Derek?
I think that kind of going, like with the previous slide where we were talking about the resources that we have available, whether it's the space and the staffing, and I know that every Y leader is compassionate and caring, and those of you on the call are all passionate about inclusion. And so when you see a need and a perceived need, that there's this kind of gut reaction to how can the Y fill it. And as you're going through those first 5 steps, you might see that the need is being met, that we can connect families with people who are already meeting that need, and that the Y's impact and resources might really be best fit in another area. And so for people like me, that's always a great reminder to be patient, follow the planning process, because that's how you ensure that you're able to make the impact where it's needed, instead of running through a wall and leaving a hole the size of your body,
I've done that many times. Can relate. So we'll continue, define your program model. So, if you're going to move forward based on the needs of the community, target population, your partners, what does inclusive programming look like? So continuing to make those, that plan, to really look at that piece. What are all the different aspects of that? Now you've done your research, what's your program model? And I'll continue through, establish an action plan and team duties. Who's going to be responsible for, all of these pieces? And it's big, right? Building sustainable partnerships, recruiting and training staff if needed, educating the community about the importance of inclusion. A lot of this, we're doing a lot of work currently around aquatics and, inclusive swim lessons. So why is this important for kids? Why is this important for youth with disabilities to do that? Orienting and training staff and volunteer tools. So we have, our action plan, our team, and then finally, doing our market, communicate, and implement. Once we've done this, how are you going to market this? How are you going to identify your marketing materials? And then in addition, how will you collect stories of impact? How are you going to get feedback? What's that feedback loop to understand how well the program's going, and also be able to tell that story that we like to do, so well at the Y. So I'll jump to, a local YMCA example, or if someone kind of wanted to pop on or put into the chat just a piece that you were thinking of, or that this is kind of brought to mind, and we can kind of walk through and provide some, our thoughts, examples, and we can continue these conversations after this session today too. By no means does this end.
See that Jenna's back on. Do you want to try to come forward, Jenna, and we'll see if it works again?
All right, fingers crossed. Oh, yes!
Yay, we got it to work. I just put some headphones in. I was like, all right, let me go to settings, try to relaunch this. But I'm really excited to talk about diversity and inclusion in our programs, and how much we need to almost recalibrate every single day, because our needs change constantly. And what I think my needs are for the community could be very different than what the community needs. And being able to talk to people who are actually involved in the programs and letting them have a voice in it. And that really helps bring the programming to be inclusive, rather than just having one program that's specific to one population, which of course is always really great. And you want to have more programs for certain populations so we can have a plethora of different programs to accommodate everyone, because not one program will accommodate everyone. But one thing I did learn when opening the facility in Virginia was that it was a facility for differing abilities wounded veterans, and Gold Star family, somebody who lost somebody in the war in their family. And so it wasn't just a facility for those who have been, who need to have a certain type of program specific to a physical disability, but it could be a mental one, but it's an integrated thing for the whole family. So when doing this, we were like, okay, there's a lot of targeted populations out there that we want to meet and we want to talk to, but just talking to one group at a time, we realized, wow, we don't have visual sensors for those who can't hear well. We don't have interpreters. We don't have this. We don't have that. There's such a large community that we don't serve that I think that we do miss all the time. And we say, hey, I just want to serve.
Hello?